Hey guys, so this lesson we're going to go over some examples of GDP calculations. So how do we actually use the GDP methods that we learned about in the last lesson to actually calculate some of the things that we want to do? Okay, so let's head straight to an example. So let's say, assume Australia can only produce flour and wheat, so it's a two-product economy where that's all we make, so just flour and wheat. Okay, where wheat is used in the production of flour. And if you remember from last lesson, we said that there's two types of products, and that's a final good and an intermediate good. So in this case, wheat is used in the production of flour. So we're going to say that wheat is our intermediate good. So that's used in the production of the final good, flour. So that is the final good. Okay, now, in the wheat industry, costs are $150 for wages, and the industry generates $200 in revenue. While in the flour industry, revenue is $400 and its cost of wages equals $100, and wheat, so it spends money on wheat, and that's $200, which coincides with the $200 in revenue for the wheat. Okay, so how are we going to calculate the actual GDP of this economy? So using the first of our methods, which was the expenditure approach, we define the expenditure approach on the amount spent on final goods, and we had the equation with household spending, government spending, investment spending, and the net exports. Now the only things bought here in the actual economy are going to be the money that we spend on our final product, which is flour. And the money that the consumers spend on that is just $400. So all we have to do, this is very easy, GDP equals the money spent on the final goods, and that's just $400. So that's using the expenditure approach to define the GDP. Okay, now, our next method was the income method. It's a little bit more involved, but we said our basic definition of the income method, we said the GDP equals the profits, which we use the symbol pi for, plus the wages. Okay, so now in the wheat industry, what are the profits? So we've got $200 in revenue, and their costs are $150. So profit for wheat, so we'll say pi for wheat equals the revenue. So that's 200 minus any costs they have, which is 150. That equals 50. Now the wages are given as 150. So the GDP just for the wheat industry equals 200 minus 150 equals 50 plus the wages, so that's 200. Okay, so that's the GDP for wheat. Now for the flour industry, we have the profit doing the same thing, is the revenue minus any costs. So profit for flour equals 400 minus the wage and minus the cost on wheat. So the profit for the flour industry equals 100, and the wage costs equals 100. Okay, so GDP for flour equals this 100 plus the wages equals 200. Okay, so adding the two GDPs up, we have the GDP total. GDP equals 400. Okay, nice and easy. Now, the next method was the value added. Now this one was a little bit trickier, so I'm going to spend a bit of time explaining this. The general formula we need to know for the value added method is GDP equals revenue. So we're going to say revenue minus the costs of any intermediate goods. So cost of intermediate goods. Okay, so using the value added method, we do this for each of the industries. So for the wheat industry, we have $200 in revenue. So the GDP for wheat equals 200 minus the cost of any goods used to produce wheat, and now they have no cost for anything else used to produce wheat because that is the first good that we use. That's just 200. Okay, now for the flour industry, same thing, we've got the revenue. So that's 400. So that equals 400, which is our revenue, minus the cost of any intermediate goods. Now, wheat is an intermediate good in this case, and the cost for the wheat is 200 here. So 400 minus 200, that equals 200. Then adding up the two GDPs for the wheat and the flour, we have GDP total equals 400. So that's a very basic example of how we can use each of the three methods to get the same answer here. So each one should come up with the same answer for a simple example such as this.